Kate Falcha. Welcome to Irish Granny Helen. This is video number 6 of our book, The Hunt for the Skinwalker, but we're on the epilogue. I'm doing unusual this time. I really wanted to continue with the sequel, which is Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, and also by Kelleher and Knapp, but also involving James Lakatsky. You will meet him in the second book. They're so closely related, and I just thought it would be a good idea to do them together. So we're going to continue here for the next week or two, maybe, with the Skinwalker story. And we're going to be looking at it more from what the military was up to, which is, I'm not finished reading, and it is pretty interesting. Okay, so this is video number 6, and we're doing the epilogue of Hunt for the Skinwalker. So 70 years ago, Heisenberg and Bohr had shouting matches over the impossible world of quantum mechanics. It's all nonsense, right? That's what they were arguing. Things just kept getting more bizarre and scary and impossible. They had the idea of parallel universes, wormholes, extraspatial dimensions. All of this was science fiction. It feels very abstract when you see it on PBS. It seems to have no bearing on the real world or on our lives. But what if they intrude? And these early cutting-edge physicists and chemists, they were willing to entertain all this stuff. What if they intrude into our lives the way things happened at the Gorman Ranch? How would we react to this incursion of other worlds? What if a non-human intelligence was toying with our reality, and scary animals and disappearing cattle? Well, I can tell you right now, I'd move. So this has happened for real in the Utah Basin and elsewhere. I think you can, at this point, argue that they've proven not hoaxes, not imagination, not hallucinations. Nobody's doing any drugs or medication. Nobody's drinking alcohol when they see these things. They're not perpetrating a hoax, perpetrating a hoax, and they're not being hoaxed. So they're very average families, appearing to be very normal families. And yet this is what they've experienced. Mainstream physics journals now describe time travel, macroscopic extra-dimensional spaces, zero-point energy, and they discuss these seriously now. They're not part of some realm of fantasy. Rather, they appear to be legitimate ways of describing the real world, admittedly a world that few of us get to see. Throughout mankind's cultural history, notes Hal Puthoff of the Institute of Advanced Studies at Austin, arguably one of the preeminent theoretical physicists in the world, there's existed the metaphysical concept that man and cosmos are interconnected by a ubiquitous, all-pervasive sea of energy that undergirds and manifests in all phenomena. This pre-scientific concept of a cosmic energy goes by many names and many traditions, such as chi, prana, mana, braka, elan vital, and so forth. Contemporary physics similarly posits an all-pervasive energetic field called quantum vacuum energy or zero-point energy, a random, ambient, fluctuating energy that exists in so-called empty space. According to Puthoff, the sea of energy described from personal experience by some mystics is the same zero-point energy field described by the mathematical equations of breakthrough physics. Physics, metaphysics, continuum, and their meeting. That's basically what we're talking about. Can this realm only be accessed by physics equations or mystics? Are 99.9% of us shut out? Yet at present, there's an unbridgeable void between this high strangeness and the speculations of mainstream physicists. Never the twain shall meet, right? Our collective perception of reality, though, it has changed. 100 years ago, scientists thought the ether explained it all. And then they laughed at the concept of the ether, I might add. We're on the cusp of an evolution in our perception of reality. We're realizing there are millions of other galaxies. The history of astronomy is the history of increasing humiliation. As our knowledge of the universe gets bigger, we get smaller. In our lifetimes, this is on 2004. In our lifetimes, we've identified more than 100 extrasolar planets, and we thought could not exist. Extrasolar, like outside of our solar system. We now think planetary systems exist that may be 13 billion years old. There are innumerable suns and innumerable earths, and therefore, by extrapolation, innumerable beings. Conservatively, there could be 2 billion Goldilocks planets, not too hot, not too cold, just right. To acknowledge ETs would be one of the most profound developments in human history. The bigger the paradigm shift, a bigger paradigm shift would be to acknowledge many universes. This is prevailing quantum physics view right now. The structure of the universe is far more exotic, with parallel dimensions beyond comprehension. Guess who said that? Philip K. Dick. The multiverse, or many worlds theory, is batted about quite a bit these days. Is there a copy of you reading this? A person who is not you, but who lives on a planet called Earth with misty mountains, fertile fields, sprawling cities in a solar system with 8 other planets. The life of this person has been identical to yours in every respect, but perhaps he or she now decides to put down this article without finishing it while you read on. The idea of such an alter ego seems strange and implausible, but it looks as if we will just have to live with it because it's supported by astronomical observations. And I have to say, I'm not very good at physics, but I will say this. It surprises me that this is considered an unexplored concept for most people, because I remember as a child talking about that with people and saying, I have my glasses on right now, but if I take my glasses off, my life is never going to be the same. It's going to go down a different path. And I was, like I said, not good at physics. I don't think this is a new concept. Every choice you make, you split off into another life path. Okay, now my head's starting to hurt. There are an infinite number of other versions of each of us. Math and observation have forced science to reevaluate the fundamental nature of reality. Acceptance came after 1957. A Princeton graduate student, Hugh Everett, said that atoms and objects can be in more than one place at a time. This began being accepted in mainstream journals by the 1990s. To explain ideas like dark energy and dark matter, 90% of matter in the universe cannot be seen or detected, is what they mean. So they came up with this thing called string theory. That dark matter exists in parallel dimensions or alternate realities, and there are several variations of string theory. Our reality has 3 dimensions, or 4 if you count time. But by 1999, most physicists favored what's called the multiverse concept, that there are infinite realities. This is getting harder and harder. Okay. There are infinite versions of you living out infinite different lives in infinite parallel realities. Michio Kaku says we physicists no longer believe in a universe. We physicists believe in a multiverse that resembles the boiling of water. Water boils when tiny particles or bubbles form, from which then begin to rapidly form and which then begin to rapidly expand. If our universe is a bubble in boiling water, then perhaps big bangs happen all the time. Tedmark concurs, the concept of the multiverse is grounded in well-tested theories, such as relativity and quantum mechanics. It fulfills both the basic criteria of empirical science. It makes predictions and it can be falsified. Scientists have discussed as many as 4 distinct types of parallel universes. The key question is not whether the multiverse exists, but rather how many levels it has. Okay. I think they should ask the hermeticists. Anything could happen. Anything that could happen is happening. The Man in the High Castle is a reflection of this. This is Philip K. Dick. They talk about him in this book. In the multiverse, anything that you could have happen to you has all because of one different choice. And I wrote in the margin, I thought so. Looming paradigm shift is coming, which we're going to discover things that are fundamentally weird and disconcerting and unbelievable, not easily explained or not easily understood and not easily accepted. But there you go. That's what's coming up. Space appears to be infinite in size. If so, then somewhere everything that is possible becomes real, no matter how improbable it is. What if one or more of these realities intruded into our lives? How would we react if we were forcibly dragged out of our psychic comfort zone into a world where wormholes were staring us in the face from only 100 feet away and dark objects climbing out of them? What if these wormholes revealed to us an alien sky from another world, an incomprehensible glimpse of an alternate reality? What if bizarre creatures, long extinct prehistoric beasts, and futuristic flying machines somehow seeped into our mundane existence from some other place and systematically assaulted our loved ones, our possessions, and most basic concepts of reality? What about the presence of a pervasive, sometimes malevolent, non-human intelligence? An invisible trickster who knows our every thought, anticipates our every move, seems intent on toying with us, terrifying us, screwing with our daily lives. A presence that orchestrates a relentless, perverse, and unpredictable campaign of all-out psychological warfare. A campaign that ultimately makes us question our own sanity. Imagine the grotesque mutilation of prized livestock, the brutal incineration of family pets, frightening intrusions by disembodied voices and shadowy figures into the sanctity of a family's home, and inexplicable manifestations by unknown beings that cannot be harmed by guns or bullets. That's clearly what happened on the ranch in Utah. What if it happened to you? So that's the end of this book. And then we have Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, an insider's account of the secret government UFO program. And this is, although it includes the phenomena, it also fills us in the machinations that were going on with the military and the government. Two of the same writers, and then James Lukatsky, who's a doctor of engineering. So let's see how far we can get through my notes here. So Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. This is from 2021, written by James Lukatsky, Colin Kelleher, and George Knapp. There's a long introduction by Senator Harry Reid, who died right after this book was published, December 28th, 2021. He died. He met Lakatsky through Bigelow, of, Bob Bigelow. Lakatsky told him that he didn't know why UFOs were ignored by science. And he really wanted to study them. He wanted to study skinwalkers, and he just didn't understand why there was such reluctance. And Reid agreed. Reid met with a number of members of Appropriations Committee in the Senate, Senator Ted Stevens, Senator Dan Inouye. I don't know if I said that right. Inouye? I believe he's from Hawaii. So I'm not going to go into this big explanation here. So Senator Stevens, this is the part that's really interesting. Senator Stevens recounted a story. He was a pilot in World War II. On one flight, he saw something off his wing that he couldn't identify. It moved in ways that he didn't think were possible. He was low on fuel, and when he landed, he asked the crew on the ground, what was that was up there with me? And they looked at him and said there was nothing up there except his airplane. At that time, he let it drop because he didn't want to be pegged as seeing things. But the experience always nagged at him. Because of his prior experience, he told Senator Inouye and me that he was happy to secure funding to study UFOs. They call them UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. I still like a UFO, so I use them interchangeably. And related phenomena. These two senators were willing to go there. They created the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications Program, AAWSAP. And the one thing that I find very annoying about anything you read about the Pentagon, the government, military, national intelligence is they love initials. And it just gets really, really annoying and tedious to have to keep explaining what they all mean. And I get so confused. So you'll forgive me. But the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications Program got $22 million to do. They formed this program and gave them $22 million and said, go for it, go study UFOs. They discovered there were thousands of credible witnesses. Oh, it didn't take me $22 million to tell them that. After he retired, this is Senator Reid, he set aside concerns he had about the stigma associated with studying this stuff and agreed to talk to the New York Times. So in December of 2017, the New York Times published this: Glowing Auras and Black Money, the Pentagon's Mysterious UFO Program. And this stirred up all kinds of interest, and the interest has never let up. But I would argue there's not enough interest. There's not the amount of discussion and attention that I think should be paid to this. But that's just me. But now the Navy has put into place, because of this, a process for pilots to report about UFOs. Before that, if you reported about a UFO, you were grounded. Same with commercial jet pilots. They don't want people flying airplanes who are seeing things. And they did not believe that this was possible. But now they're beginning to allow for, okay, there's a repeated story over and over and over, something's up. And it's important, I think, this is not in the book, but I just think I'll throw this in here. It's really important to remember that you do not become a military pilot flying, I don't know, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars worth of hardware around that are potentially lethal without having innumerable studies to your mental health and your background and your reliability and your personality. How stable a person are you? I mean, they just put them through so much. These are not people given to fantasy. Anyway, from the very beginning, the book pushes this point that there has been confusion about this AAWSAP that was created by the Senate to do this Bigelow government program. It has been misidentified. It has been mixed up with the AATIP, as I'm telling you, the letters. It's been mixed up with the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, which was an investigation of UFOs for the military, and it did not receive the money from Congress. The AAWSIP with Bigelow received the money from Congress, and so we want to give them credit. They want to be sure that they get full credit, and they want to be sure to draw the line. Their money came from Congress and also from Bigelow, and the other guys, it's all military. So the book hopes to clarify it, and I can see I'm doing a great job so far. So Senator Reid wanted the government to end the confusion by establishing and funding a centralized, coordinated science, technology, national security effort. He's like, well, let's just stop fooling around here and let's really study this. He wanted Mark Rubio and Mark Warner to create a UAP task force within the Pentagon, make a military Pentagon group. And that's what they do, is they study UFOs. And they released this report that they wrote in 2021. And basically, the Pentagon acknowledged that the government agrees that UAPs exist. And only 1 out of 144 reports could be identified. And they only looked at 144. Many, many more exist. But to be careful to say, unidentified aerial phenomena does not mean flying saucers from other planets. It means things that they've seen in the sky that they can't explain. There's a wide variety. Some of them fly into the ocean and out again. That's a whole other story. So let's get into the introduction. So June 25th, 2021, the Director of National Intelligence was saying that UFOs are a security threat and a threat to flight safety. There's things up there flying around that don't have permission from the ground control and might crash with other airplanes. There's that. That's a basic thing. This was a 180-degree change for the government to say this. This was shocking. It should have been more shocking, but it was shocking. So why? Why did the government change their tune? This book describes 13 years that came before that announcement about this unique program, the first official study by the DIA, the Department of, Intelligence something, spooks. 2008 to 2010 is when this all happened. The article in the newspaper, the statement by the Pentagon, that was the culmination. There was time before. So the Advanced Aerospace Weapon System Application Program began all of this. 50 years before that, there was 100% denial. Then there was this program, went on for 13 years. And by 2017, they had the New York Times article. And we still knew, they knew, we knew. Anybody who pays attention knows that all of the details weren't entirely true. In 2008 to 2010, the Pentagon studied UFOs, paranormal, and psychic things. And the interesting thing is, why are they studying psychic things and paranormal things if they're studying flying saucers? Well, for one thing, it's unidentified phenomena, and it includes weird things like telepathic communication, switching off and on of missile controls, glowing orbs that get into the cockpit of fighter jets, interference with radar, manifestations of lights that shouldn't be there, and just a lot of other things that I forget right now. But UFOs are associated with all kinds of paranormal activity, and the military agreed and wanted to study them. So it was a big, large program, many controversial projects within the program, like you guys are going to study orbs, you guys are going to study Bigfoot, yeah. And it was the first serious treatment in a very long time. Like Project Blue Book was ostensibly doing something, but it didn't. Especially interesting was the inclusion of the paranormal and the psychic stuff interacting with the UFOs. There was a lot of debate about including anything that wasn't technology. Like, are we studying this because they can fly faster than we think is possible? Are we studying this because they stop on a dime and it doesn't seem to hurt whoever's driving their vehicle? They're defying physics. There's more to it than that. The inclusion came because of Bigelow's and NIDS's investigation at Skinwalker Ranch. And it included work written up by Dr. Jacques Vallée and Dr. Eric Davis. The Pentagon cleared this book. Some of the names were changed. People on active duty personnel were changed. Some private medical information was anonymized. The program was created to evaluate the threat to potential everything, not just to study the technology, but okay, we've got these unexplained things in the sky. Are these enemies? I mean, what's going on? They weren't per se going to study their propulsion or anything like that. But they cast a wide net over all related phenomena. So the project managers became James Lukatsky and Colin Kelleher. And they got help on this book from George Knapp. But they want to be really clear, this was not AATIP. The New York Times mistakenly connected AATIP to the $22 million. No. The AAWSAP was the original program. Lukatsky was the program manager. He was able to drum up more money. He got Bigelow the official contract to work for 2 years. Now you're going to hear some different amounts of money. You're going to hear different lengths of contract because it was in flux. It was being negotiated with the Pentagon, the Senate, private funding, and things changed. So not to worry so much. I mean, it matters to them, but the story from our point of view, I think, is probably more about, seriously, they're studying this? Who cares about the money part? I want to know about why they're studying it and what they learned. So they focused on tech and physics that weren't known conventionally. They didn't focus on current aerospace technology. So they weren't looking at, oh, look, they can go a little bit faster. No, they were looking at, oh, they're disappearing from the sky. That kind of thing. Skinwalker Ranch and other weird phenomena helped them to get the program going. So chapter 1 starts July 2009. A guy called Jonathan Axelrod, who's an aerospace engineer, he was in naval intelligence. He led the investigation of the Tic Tac incident. So this was a UFO shaped like a Tic Tac but much bigger, that appeared in the sky. I mean, how do I explain this? Because it's not really explained here. You probably know the story, and I hope I get it right. It's been a while. The Navy was doing not rehearsals, practices. You could tell my kids were in dance. They were rehearsing off the coast of San Diego with all these different boats. You know, they had submarines and battleships and air carriers, you know, aircraft carriers. And while all the brass, all these top guys were standing with binoculars watching what was going on, this weird thing came out of the sky, started to behave contrary to the laws of physics. They sent a couple of fighter jets up after them, and they were given Mary chase. They got scared and came back. There were weird inconsistency on radar on the aircraft carrier, radar inside the airplanes. This thing came out of the sky, went into the ocean, and came back out and went up into the sky. And you've got admirals and intelligence people and fighter pilots. The fighter pilots were featured on television later. I don't know if it was 60 Minutes or Dateline. I can't remember. It's been a while. You've never seen two more uncomfortable, reluctant people. You would have thought they were guilty of some heinous crime, and the investigators had them in a corner. They were so uncomfortable. This is a hard thing to talk about if you're a jet pilot. So the Nimitz was out there in the ocean off San Diego and had to send FA-18 Hornets, 2 of them, up to chase the UFOs. And they were studying that. Axelrod was investigating that when the Skinwalker Ranch stuff started to happen. There was a guy called Jim Costigan, another guy called Dave Wilson, who were experts with sensory technology, you know, like, I'm just going to throw something out there. I'm not saying they use this, like ground penetrating radar, that kind of thing. And they had been consultants at Skinwalker. They were open-minded skeptics. They were, let's see what kind of data we can collect. So while working on the ranch one night, they hit an area where the temperature dropped from 70 degrees to 20 degrees in a couple of steps, like you stepped into the cold. I have felt that in haunted house. It's weird. Stepped into this cold, and there was no apparent reason. They weren't in any kind of geographical dip or near water or anything. There was just this weird boundary of chilled air beyond. And then they hit an area where both of them started experiencing sudden, inexplicable, severe anxiety. Mortal fear, like a panic attack. They claimed it was the worst thing they'd ever felt in their lives. They both started sweating and shaking. They had night vision things, and they saw an area ahead with a dark oval. It's like there was a black block in their vision, totally black, and it felt menacing. They said it radiated menace. The closer they got, the more afraid of death they felt, like this existential dread. So they backed away. And as they backed away, the farther they got away from it, the lower their fear went. They could only see the oval with night vision, goggles or binoculars or whatever, but everybody could feel it. When they returned home, their families started to have weird experiences. This is scary. Axelrod's wife at night saw a humanoid black shape in the house and heard footsteps. His son saw blue orbs in his room. One got close to the sun, and it seemed like it was under intelligent control. His wife kept seeing shadowy figures and hearing loud noises. It was always when Jonathan was out of the house. There's a description of something his wife saw here. Let me see here. One of the most bizarre things, standing upright, leaning against one of the trees in the perimeter of her yard, was a huge wolf-like creature. She saw the creature plainly in the dim night light. It had long hair and looked like a wolf, but was standing on 2 legs. She felt paralyzed, confused, dread. The creature appeared to be staring at her. Its gaze was not friendly. She continued to stare at this eerie sight, trying to fathom the impossibility of an upright wolf-like creature in a quiet upper middle-class suburban Virginia neighborhood. It took one last look at her, turned, and walked slowly on two legs into the tree line. Within minutes, she lost sight. She stood there a long time, trying to determine if she had just had a very intense hallucination or if her mind was beginning to go. The scene had been so bizarre and frightening, she decided not to call her husband or tell her kids. The kids were stable and well adjusted, and she knew that they were on edge because of all the unexplained events that had been happening in the house. She went to bed and tried to put the surreal vision out of her mind. Later, the children and her husband both saw this wolf-like creature. 3 days later, both sons saw the wolf in the yard on two legs. They felt fear. They believed it was what's called a dog man. They did find claw marks on the tree where it had been holding on. Everyone in the family had these experiences. Jonathan feared that something from the Skinwalker had attached itself and come home with him. Chapter 2, Harry Reid. So Senator Harry Reid retired December 8th, 2016. And they threw him a huge party, and they named all, I mean, he didn't throw it, but he was, I guess, really respected in the Senate. And as I found out later, I didn't agree with a lot of his positions on things, but I give him credit for being willing to tackle this topic. Had a huge party, lots of famous people. I won't even go into it. Many laudatory speeches, and he was very uncomfortable with all the praise. No one mentioned the work he'd done with the UFO when a year later it all came out in the New York Times. Although he created the AAWSAP, it was the AATIP that stuck for everybody. He had not expected UFOs to be a prominent part of his legacy. I think I will be remembered for other things, he said. He had become an unlikely leader in the Congress. He became the Senate Majority Leader. In an article called The Kingmaker 2019, The Atlantic called him a deadpan sphinx or elliptical oracle. His pronouncements arrived with the mystique of messages from the other plane of existence, like the ant farmer surveying the tunnels from outside the glass. But why would a shrewd and experienced political survivor like Reid put his credibility and career on the line by tackling an issue that for decades had been mocked, derided, and ridiculed? For elected officials, as for scientists and journalists, the UFO subject was and is inherently perilous, a considerable risk to one's personal and professional credibility. And I am here to tell you, I have no credibility to begin with, but people ask me what I've been reading, and I tell them I'm reading about the two-legged, the wolf walking on two legs at Skinwalker Ranch. And they're getting out the white jackets. It's okay, let them all laugh. Now, where are we here? So he had public interest in UFOs since 1989. He did a TV interview in Las Vegas, and he admitted a personal interest, and he urged congressional inquiries. So 8 months before that, he had a conversation with George Knapp of radio fame. Knapp asked to talk with him because of what Knapp had learned about UFOs in Nevada and Area 51. From then on, they both investigated and shared information with each other. They got along really well. Interesting little duo there. Reid was interested intellectually, politically, and religiously, which is another feature. He was a Mormon. He was not into public displays of religiosity, but part of the Mormon theology is a belief in other worlds, and it wasn't a big leap for him. In 1995, Bigelow created the National Institute for the Discovery of Science, NIDS, and funded some UFO organizations. They wanted to advance the study of UFOs and consciousness. And he, now we're kind of summarizing what happened at the beginning of the hunt for the Skinwalker. They formed this group. They got a world-class board of science researchers, academics, writers, intelligence officers, and other partial list. It's in the book. I won't go into it. We just know that they got all kinds of really reputable people interested in investigating this. And Bigelow invited Reed to look into his board. He attended the 5th meeting in Las Vegas, August 3rd, 1996, and he had 3 full-timers on this board, Kelleher, Eric Davis, and a guy called George Onat, which hadn't been named, I don't think, in the first book, but they often refer to him as the veterinarian. He was a microbiologist and veterinarian. He was very instrumental in looking at the mutilations. And those 3 guys were core investigators of the Skinwalker Ranch investigation. Reed was really hooked on all of this after attending this meeting, but he kept it quiet. He met John Glenn while he was advocating against NASA's abuse of laboratory chimps, which is a whole, oh my God. So they got the lab to shut down the chimp experiments and retire them to a sanctuary. Reed talked to Glenn about the UFO studies. Glenn was very interested. They also got interest from Bill Clinton, John McCain, and Joe Lieberman. So there were a few people who were open-minded enough to say, well, let's look into it. Bigelow told Reed that he'd been contacted by a guy called James Lakatsky. He was a Defense Intelligence Agency, that's the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency rocket scientist. This is like the CIA for the Pentagon. The letters, the alphabet soup drives me insane. He wanted to visit Skinwalker to identify potential threats, and he could publicly talk about any threats he found, but he couldn't admit the source of where he got the information. So Chapter 3, James Lakatsky, the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications Program. In 2007, he worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency. This is the CIA of the Pentagon. In their Defense Warning Office, he was the Director of Reports on Missile Defense Threats. So anything that looked like it was a danger to us in relationship to missiles, that was his purview. So I have this little chart here to help me keep track. The DWO, he worked in the Defense Warning Office, the DWO, of the DIA, the Defense Intelligence, oh my God, I've forgotten already. And that was the office of the Pentagon. He was in charge of the $22 million program and was able to manipulate Congress and the DIA to get way more money. Remember I said the money amounts keep changing, so don't think that I'm just making this up as we go along. These are reported amounts as funding came in from different places. I was able to advertise for a contractor, and Bigelow got the job. He was the only bidder in 2008. So there were 2 parts of interest that they were going to use to do this investigation. There was the issue of what the government objectives were, and then there was the issue of how Bigelow proposed to do it. So he was going to write a bid for the job, and he would have to explain how he would meet the government objectives in detail. So to understand physics and engineering of advanced weapon system applications and how they're a threat from now to 2050 was part of their interest. To focus on breakthrough technology that create discontinuities in currently evolving technology trends. In other words, how did they do that? We can't do that. We can't explain that. That's bizarre. Like defying the laws of physics as far as acceleration and speed and appearing and disappearing, going through walls, showing orbs. I mean, just all of this stuff. And they made it clear that this was not an attempt to focus on the extrapolation of current aerospace technology. They didn't want to study their night vision capabilities or their radar reading or whatever. I mean, I don't know enough about it to even make up something, but they wanted the weird stuff. They wanted to try to explain what is this anomalous stuff. So the government said, we want you to study lift, propulsion, control, power generation, spatial temporal translation, materials, configuration structure, signature reduction. So optical, infrared, radio frequency, acoustic. So how do you disappear and reappear on radar? Like that. Human interface, telekinesis, human effects, armament. Are they shooting lasers? And other peripheral areas, whatever's left in there. This is going to require numerous experts with extensive experience in breakthrough aerospace research and development. So Bigelow was the only one who put in a proposal. There was some other interest, but only his proposal was written in 2008. So it lists what they plan on doing. Number one, create in-depth database that will affiliate with organizations that already have databases. In other words, don't replicate the work that's already been done. Get in touch with MUFON. Get in touch with these other investigations that have lists of witnesses, testimony. Number two, seek out and contact the experts. Number three, use the Utah Basin as a living laboratory by providing money, assistance, and security to the ongoing program there, the NIDS, and also include other areas like that, like Dolce and places like that. Collect oral histories. That would be the interesting part. Access, they wanted access to the Bigelow space platforms. In other words, landing and taking off or something, I think. They wanted to be able to access the DIA database to save time and money and increase productivity by joint efforts. Like, don't repeat the work somebody else has already done. Number seven, address biological human effects. Command of extreme effects could eclipse conventional weapons. This is the big threat here that they're talking about. Number eight, remote viewing. Number nine, create expert analysis groups to synthesize all of the results. Bigelow got a 2-year contract with an okay. They would do the in-depth database, the seeking out the experts, going to Utah and other similar places, collecting oral histories. They wouldn't have access to Bigelow space platforms. I think he wanted to use, their money for, I'm not really sure what this is about. They would get to access the DIA database, and they would create expert analysis groups. And they kind of skipped over remote viewing. So they got the AAWSAP contract. They became the UFO program, and how they fit into the realm, how the paranormal stuff fit in with the UFOs. So they weren't just looking at material reality. That's really important. This is the Pentagon. No. The Senate, Congress, helping to fund. Well, it was the Pentagon too, the DIA. See how confusing this is? There is so much interconnectedness and denial of interconnectedness and subterfuge and weird, and it's on purpose. I swear it's on purpose. It reminds me of Senator Whitehouse's book about dark money, where he did the big chart. We started out with the Heritage Foundation, and all of a sudden there are so many different groups that are attached to other groups and part of other groups that change their names and change their board of directors. And before you know it, you have no idea where the money's going. This is what this feels like to me. So Lakatsky did huge counterintelligence security sweeps and backgrounds of everybody involved to be hired, to be witnesses, whatever. They got a new top secret facility clearance for Bigelow's buildings, and they did a skiff inside. That's one of those secret places where you can have a top clearance conversation, and they're vetted for like nobody can hear you, don't bring your phone in, there's no listening devices, whatever. They got all kinds of high clearances for their employees. They got a secure communication systems in place. They had more than 75 personnel doing exotic research, whatever that means, and several hundred field personnel. All the publications were appropriately edited and cleared as they went along. So the contract and the money expanded, and the final publication of the databases would be 2011. They had difficulty extending the program because of delays in getting special access program designation. But they were given new unclassified nickname, Advanced Aerospace Threat ID Program, AATIP. And this was later mistakenly linked by the New York Times to the original $22 million of funding. But the real name is AAWSAP, and it's the correct project name. And I guess it created an enormous amount of confusion. So we've done our part to clear it up. I'm sure it's all very clear now. Lakatsky knew that the program needed to be moved out of the Department of Defense to the Department of Homeland Security. And I really don't understand the ins and outs of that. It didn't explain it, but it never happened anyway. Lakatsky tried again with the Department of Defense, and it failed. But at that point, he had planned on retiring, and he retired. And despite not having official funding, the program parts seemed to be going on here and there within other parts of the Pentagon and the military and the government and whatever. Investigations continue according to government, MUFON, military, and commercial research of the technology, also according to the History Channel. Okay, that's the end of that chapter, and we'll call this good until next time. So that's the end of video 6. And I hope you're liking this book. This is the Pentagon book. Now this would be video number 2 of the Pentagon book, coming up next time. Okay, I hope it's not too confusing. I do find it a little confusing myself. I think it's, like I said, there's an intentionality to it. But the very fact that the Pentagon and national intelligence and the military and the government and Congress, and they're all willing to say, oh yeah, UFOs. That's a paradigm shift. That's huge. We need to acknowledge that. Okay, let's hope there's no dark objects at the end of the bed tonight. Thanks very much for watching. Slángafuil. Slánja.